Welcome, Amanda, to Train the Trainer, our page turn activity. So my first question to you, besides saying welcome, is did you have a chance to take a peek at the pre-work document and maybe even the quiz?
Yes, I read through it, highlighted some things that stood out to me, and then took the quiz.
Any initial big questions that you have that you want to make sure I answer before we get started?
Um, no, maybe just an example of how to access the materials when I'm ready to use the training materials to share with people.
Okay, we can do that at the end. I'm sure. I want to make sure I leave to that. And the
Sounds
what
good.
we're going to do today really is kind of review what was in the page or the pre-work document to make sure if you have any questions, that'd be a great time to ask them. And then after we're done with that, we're actually going to look at each of the documents, the type of documents we use for training. And we'll kind of page turn through some of them. And if time permits, I'll allow you to even read one of the facilitation guide pages, the scripting, out loud, as if you were facilitating, just as a practice to see what that feels like and kind of ask questions about it.
Sounds
So that,
good.
that's kind of what we're going to do. We should be done, like I said, within an hour. And we'll finish up with your question about demonstration of how to access. All right. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
So we'll start with the quiz. And there were 9 questions. I don't know if you got 100. You don't have to tell me. But they were designed to be a little bit challenging. But if you read the materials, at least with the materials sitting there, you might be able to do pretty well.
Mhm.
So our first question was, where are Barnabas training materials located? And out of the 4 answers, which do you think might have been the best answer?
On the protected Google Share Drive.
Oh, you must have gotten a good score on this quiz. You're right. That
Not
actually
perfect, but good.
that may change at some point. We're constantly revising our materials, looking at how we've organized them, adding additional materials. So the demonstration I'll give you at the end, that may look and feel may change to some degree, but it should look at least somewhat familiar because however we change it, we're going to keep the organizational structure the same.
Sounds good.
So second question has to do with our values. And we've got a number of different values. And if you're trying to identify the ones that were in the document, um, which one or all do you think are correct?
All of the above.
You liked them all, huh? You were right.
Yep.
We do have 4 core values, and we'll go into details about them sometimes in our other materials. But basically, we don't tell people what to do. We try to influence through sharing our experiences. We don't charge anything. All of our efforts are supported by prayer, and we're not about building an organization. We're trying to help people build groups, pastors for pastors in a local area for a local area by the pastors in that area. So our next question has to do with the levels of learning. Here we get a little bit more uh, academic as to how we go about this. And the reason we do this is so that when you look at the materials, you may start to recognize some of our approach and why we do the things that we do. So what are the first 3 levels of learning? That'd be the lowest levels of learning up.
This one was tricky and I had to slow down and look at it. And thankfully, an imagery graph helped me out. And so it was the knowledge, comprehension, and application.
Exactly right.
Since I'm a visual learner.
This graphic, I mean, it helps me too when I first learned it. It's those first 3 levels. One of the things that I like about the graphic as well is that if you look at it closely, you can see that the below the steps really talk about, what you have to be able to learn how to do at a knowledge level. So you should be able to repeat something or pick something out of a list or define it. If you're in the comprehension level, you should be able to discuss it. And if you're applying it, well, then you should be able to actually do it or demonstrate it to someone. And the words on the top are some of the ways that these things can be taught. So our next quiz question is going to get into that a little bit. So what training delivery method has the lowest average retention rate?
Lecture.
And as a pastor, you probably do a lot of lecturing.
Yes, a lot.
So isn't it interesting to know that lecture has only a 5% retention rate? and all of the work that we put into a message that we're going to communicate. Maybe it's a 30-minute message, realizing that maybe only a minute and a half is what's retained after a week or so is kind of disheartening. So one of the things that we want to make sure that in our training we're incorporating is more than just a lecture or demos like what we're doing here. Is we want to, at the top, you see lecture is 5%. Reading is 10%. So in this case, we've done some pre-work. So there's a chance that you'll remember more of what we're going through. If we have visuals, like what we're doing here with PowerPoint slides, that can help. If we've added a video, that can also help. And then it gets even better if you're demonstrating something. So if you're giving a speech and you have a chance to demonstrate it during your speech, your lecture, you're going to enhance someone's ability to retain, remember. If there's even a chance to have a discussion like you and I will be having, then that again helps increase the amount of information and concepts that will be retained and perhaps used, which is our overall objective. So you'll see those types of activities used throughout the training, this and other training that we do. So why do we use slides as a delivery tool in the teaching process? This may sound like a simple answer, but it's really kind of profound.
I would say the last one, even though for me as the presenter, I could see how the first two would apply to me, but I'd say the last one is the reason why.
That is actually correct. The first one is if you're a brand new presenter and you've never presented before, or if the first time you're giving a sermon or whatnot, slides can really help you with your flow. So that is actually true. And they do help the presenter remember key concepts. That's true too. And because there's motion, yep, okay, participants do stay more awake when there's something to watch besides somebody speaking or the talking head, as they say. But the real fundamental reason is to give the participants time to think, because we hear words, people talk at a certain speed, but our minds process at a much faster speed. So you need to give the mind something to do while they're listening, and the slides can help with that. All right, so the purpose of a facilitation guide, we put a lot of time and effort into these things. So what do you think is the best answer for the purpose of the facilitation guide?
I think this one is all of the above.
It is. We put a lot into a facilitation guide. It outlines what the session is. It talks about objectives and length. It gives you a script that you can use if you want, or use it as a guide. It does outline how to facilitate the activities, the instructions to give and whatnot. So it's kind of all of the above. And people use it for different reasons at different ways. But if you want to know anything about a training that we're doing, the first place to go is the facilitation guide, because it will give you kind of all of this in one shot. All right, so we talked about communications, and we gave you what I called a formula or a method of communication. Do you remember which one of the four up here represent what we were talking about in the document?
The one with a lot of tells. Tell them what you'll tell them, and tell them what you told them.
Yep, that's absolutely right. And even if you didn't know the answer to this one, the giveaway on test taking is the longest answer is a lot of times the right answer. And in this case, it would be true.
Why did it take me over 40 years to learn that, Dave?
Well, the thing here is when I first started training, one of the pieces of advice I was given from an experienced trainer was always start by telling them what you're going to tell them. Then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And if you think about any communication, it could be written, or it could be verbal, or it could be a training. You always want to start with some kind of summary of what you're going to do and relate it to the person so they know why they should pay attention. And then, of course, you're going to explain the details. You give them examples and you demo it, however you're going to do it. Tell them stories. And then at the end, you summarize those key points again. That's 3 times you've hit it. So that way a person has a chance to remember it better. So it's a good way to organize your communication. So that is the correct answer. Almost done. What facilitation best practices did we cover in the document? I mean, there's a ton of them, but we only covered a few. So what did you recognize some or all of these?
This is the question that made me not get 100. I chose the answer that you elaborated on, not the ones that you alluded to or suggested. So I initially said practice, 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 because that one was elaborated on. And I didn't say all of the above, even though you did mention the other three in the packet.
Yep.
Um,
And that's, sorry about that. Maybe we should have elaborated on all of them.
that was my trick question.
Well, all of the above was correct. But there are even more than these best practices when you're facilitating. As a pastor or somebody who teaches, you probably have more that you could add to this list. Practicing is obviously the way to get comfortable and confident with your material. The more you know your audience, the better you're able to help them see why they need to sit through your session. And if you're a pastor and you're preaching, it's important to talk to your audience in a way that's relatable, so they don't fall asleep, but also so that they actually listen to your words and maybe apply them. The more you repeat the key points, it helps them remember them. And of course, slowing down your delivery can help emphasize points. So those are all important for different reasons, and those are the ones that we did cover. So thank you. I've just covered those. So the last thing we're going to do then is do a page turn, which means we're going to look at slides, facilitator guides, participant guides, tip sheets, and self-paced. So at least you'll see what they look like and know what their purpose is in general. And we'll spend most of our time on this. Then we'll see if you have any questions, and then we'll show you how to access the materials.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to change the way I'm sharing my document here. And I'm going to use what I would normally do is click on the slides during the demo. But for you, I want to do it in a faster way. So I've already pulled up each one of those as a link. So here's a demonstration of what our slides look like. And this is for this session, the one that I'm giving now. So slides are on the left. If you ever used this type of thing before, you can scroll through the slides by simply just clicking on the left, and you can move your way down. And you can see the slides that we've already talked about. As you're preparing for your lesson, the way to look at it is to scroll through them and make sure you know what they are and what you're going to be seeing. Look at the words on the slides. I use the slides best when I'm facilitating, simply by glancing at the slide that we're on, and I remember what is the purpose of that slide. What am I trying to get across? The key points. And then I can talk about those. So I don't use the slide as a crutch, just kind of is there for the learner. Like for instance, in this case, we used a graphic to help emphasize the points about the percentage of retention rates of learning. And when I hit this slide here, you could see how you could actually go up the stair step and what the below the line and above the line words might mean. So I was kind of
so basically build upon the slides. Don't just read what's on the slides, but elaborate and build upon it.
Good point. I've heard criticisms of people who facilitate and say every word on a slide. They, after a while, like in secular business, people stop attending meetings. They'll just ask for the slide deck. Because if you're just going to read the slides and have appendices and just read through those, well, I can do that on my own. I don't really need to be there. So yeah, try not to read the slides. The slides are to enhance the communication of your message. And that's what a slide deck is used for. I mean, let's say you're in a place where suddenly the power goes out and you don't have slides. Hopefully it's an auditorium of a size where you can still speak loud enough so that everybody can hear you without amplification. But if that's the case, you could do the whole thing without slides. Slides are to enhance the delivery. They're not critical for the delivery. So if you've read through your materials, you have the facilitation guide. It's always a good idea to print it in case you have some sort of a power challenge. Or if you're using a network ability to access some of the things in the slides, you have them printed so that you can just flip right to that and move right along. You don't have to worry about technology glitches, which can happen. So then the next thing we wanted to talk about was facilitation guide itself. So here's an example of a facilitation guide. And in this case, you'll see there's like a table of contents over on the left. But facilitation guides are like a one-stop shop, I think I said earlier. It says how to use it. There's some tips on how to use the guide. There's also, next we have a table of contents of what the flow is if you want to get to a particular page. We have, this is important to know why you're doing this training session. So there's a description of it and what you're trying to accomplish. So in this case, upon completion, participants should be able to locate our materials, know what the define learning in the context of what we're trying to do with pastors in this material, identify at least 3 core values, describe why it's essential, describe how to use the slide like this or facilitation guides, and set yourself up to begin to practice delivering the content. So that's kind of what we're trying to do. If you accomplish these things, whether you use slides or not, you win.
Fantastic.
So there's other helpful things in this facilitation guide. I also put a lesson plan in all of our guides. That gives you an idea of how long to spend on each thing. So in this particular plan, you'll see different topics and how much time you'd spend, and then also the slide numbers. This is an earlier version of the session that we're doing now, so you're looking at it a little bit differently. And then you'll see the slides themselves. So for instance, here's a welcome. It's a fairly, couple of minute long welcome. So I said 4 minutes it should take. We also, of the top right, we say, what's the purpose of the slide? If while this one's up, you should be welcoming participants and giving them an idea of what we're going to be doing. Okay. There's no real activity for them to do other than to listen and perhaps ask questions. There's no animations, which means if you're clicking, it's not going to bring up an image or a word. And your objective is just to help people feel welcome and for the participants to think about the topic and how it might apply to them. It's almost like you go to the movie theater and you watch a movie and you want to get somebody's attention on the movie itself. But before the movie, they have all these trailers of other movies and things. There's a purpose they do that. Besides just sell those movies, it's to get the viewer, the moviegoer, to stop what they're doing in their busy world. Stop thinking about all that stuff. Put it aside and start focusing on what's in front of them. And you want the trailers and whatnot to be long enough so that people start squirming, going, well, when do they get to the movie? I'm sure you felt that. I know I have. And that's when you want the trailers to end and get to the movie. So for the welcome session, you want it to be long enough to say, thank you for coming, to give you an idea of what's going to happen and have it enough length of time so that they can shift from thinking about their everyday stuff to, okay, now this is going to be train the trainer. So I got to pay attention because I'm going to be training something next week. I need some tips or whatever it is that they need. So that it gives you the timing. And then from there, you'll see the next slide. In this case, we used an agenda slide. And it has some graphics. So you see this is a thumbnail of the slide itself. You may not be able to read all the words because of the size. That's okay. It's just to remind you which slide it is. You can always go to the slide deck and read it. Again, this slide says it's only going to be up for a couple minutes. And here's a suggestion of what you might say. So if you were to, and I don't know, can you read the part under say? Is it big enough to read? So if you were to deliver this slide, Amanda, Ed, you were the person who was facilitating. One way you could deliver this would be to just, where it says say, just read what it says. Or you could put it in your own words. So because I didn't give you any prep time for this, let's assume that you were delivering this material and you're at this point and you've just flipped to the agenda slide. Would you please read the part that says say, as if you were delivering it?
Sure. As someone who is looking to facilitate our training materials to others, you may also be asking yourself, how do I find and use Barnabas training materials? How will I know if my audience understands what I'm sharing? Are there any tips on how to best use the materials? What underlying values should I be demonstrating when I share these materials? What happens after the session is even over? Each of these questions will be answered and more during this session.
Nice job.
Yay.
I've actually seen people deliver content like this, reading the text there. And the person who I saw do it best was actually sitting down, which I don't recommend. And she had it up in front of her so that people couldn't see it, of course. But her eyes were like close to looking at the people, but the stuff was right below her. And she was really just reading. And she was trying to read it naturally. And it actually came across okay. I was really surprised at how well it can come across. But the reality is, it's not as interactive. As an experienced presenter, you're going to want to walk around a little bit. You're going to want to maintain eye contact with your audience. You're going to want to do all the things that you do to effectively present. Tell some of your own stories, put emphasis on a point or two that you think might be particularly interesting to this audience. So the words there are just a guide. Say what you want. As long as you are providing a quick overview of the topics, allowing time for them to reflect, you've done your job. And you could click and move on. So you see the whole thing is kind of organized in that way. You'll see the slide on the left, objectives and timing on the right, and scripting below. So the scripting is longer, some of it's shorter. And if you have some sort of a activity that we're doing, there'll be instructions that what you say to a person, how you get the activity. And you'll see that all of our activities on the slide itself will also have the instructions, because inevitably people are not always paying attention to what you say. Sorry to clue you in, but no matter who you are and how good of a presenter you are, people will have other things going on in their mind. You might give the instructions on the activity, and about a third of the people will understand it. And the other third haven't heard it all. And somebody was talking to somebody else and they missed everything. So you want to have your instructions on the slide. You'll want to have them that you say them. And as a presenter, you're probably going to have to say your instructions 2, maybe 3 times in order for your audience to be ready to do the activity. So you'll see notes about that in our materials as we have activities. And that's kind of how the flow goes. You work your way through all the slides, and you get to the end, and we usually end with the next steps of most of our sessions. And then we have a question and answer part. So that's how the facilitation guide kind of puts it all together. And, with some practice, read it a few times ahead of time, practice it out loud a few times like you would any kind of presentation. Assuming you're familiar with the content, you can start training. Most of our content is set up the exact same way, so you'll be able to see it.
Wonderful. What happens if I get to the question and answer slide and someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer?
You think that might ever happen?
It could.
I think it happens all the time. So it's not unexpected. And if you don't know the answer, you tell them you don't know. Always be upfront. Say, listen, that's a good one. I'm going to have to get back to you on that one. And make sure you have their contact information and set an expectation as to when you'll get back to them, so that they're not waiting for something that you haven't gotten done yet. But yeah, that's or you can, another way to do it is, instead of answering the question, ask the audience. If you have an audience of others, say, does anybody know the answer to that question? Number one, maybe they do. And 2, it gives you a chance to think about the answer in case you don't know the answer right off the top of your head. So it's a good way to start if you have a larger audience.
Okay.
So we've done slides and facilitation guides. The next thing I wanted to look at was participant guides. Now, we don't do this in all of our sessions, but we do have participant guides for some. So if you're looking through a participant guide, there's a cover of one, and they're usually printed and they're handed out. Usually come with a table of contents. Most all of them do. Some sort of a welcome. It can might be a text in the form of paragraphs, or it might be bullets, depending on how we've done it. And then you'll see an agenda. So everybody wants to know what's coming first, what's coming next. Some of our agendas have timing, so you'll have an idea of when the breaks are and how long it's coming up and how long each session is going to be. And this one, we do have timings for breaks and lunches. And then you'll see, in this case, there was a pre-work assignment. So we've duplicated the pre-work assignment. And this is something that they do on their own. This is an example of a self-study module that we would have them do. So we put this in the participant guide for them to go, oh yeah, that's right, I did that. And then you'll see a place for notes as you're talking. And the topics are there. And they can go ahead and continue to put notes in or not. It's up to them. This is their participant guide. But as a facilitator, you're going to want to tell them every once in a while about, so we should be on page 3 of the participant guide, or page 6. It helps people recenter on where you're supposed to be. And it's also an opportunity for them to capture things that they were trying to remember. So some people bring pens and paper to sessions and are ready to take notes. Others aren't. So our participant guide is a good way to help them. And then they also include things like graphics. In this case, it was a graphic about overall how you build a whole network of John 17:23 groups. And the different sections that we would be talking about would be praying, connecting, and stewarding. So this is a way to remind them of what it was, but also so they don't have to write such detailed notes. Some of it's already captured there for them. And that's what a participant guide looks like. You know, there'll be multiple pages of this. In this case, there was a quiz that we did. So we gave them the answers, or actually a place for them to redo the quiz. And then we gave them the answers so that they could circle the right ones. So there was a lot of things in this particular session. It was a multi-day session, so this is a longer guide. But it's really a place to keep notes and a place for them to engage all in one document.
Great.
Then I believe the next thing we do is a tip document. Yeah, every once in a while, you'll see in some of our sessions, we have an extra document that has tips that have to do with that particular topic. In this particular topic, we were discussing networking, or stewarding, and how do you actually do the stewarding process? And there was a lot of content in there, so hard for people to remember everything, all the steps and all the pieces. So we felt like a reference document or a tip sheet would be a good idea. So you'll see these are standalone documents. They're usually given out as part of a session, or they might be provided as part of a pre-work or a standalone self-paced. And they're organized like this. It's really to be used as reference. And most of the things that are on here would be covered in the teaching session. So it should be as reinforcement. It shouldn't be brand new. So you'll see those occasionally. And the last thing you'll see is, and you saw earlier, was a standalone module. They're sometimes used for pre-work, like in this case, this is one of 6 pieces of pre-work. And sometimes they're just standalone on a particular topic. In this case, I think what we did is we asked them to reflect on these questions, these bullets, while they're watching this video. It's only 3 minutes and 23 seconds. Then they read these few pages of our group resource guide, and you can click on these links to get to them. And then after completing the assignment so far, click on this link and it'll give you a quiz. Just a place to, did I catch everything that was important? And that is the entire content. There's a place to keep some notes here. But that's what many of our standalone modules look like.
Awesome.
I've
Very
thrown a
thorough.
lot at you. What questions do you have?
I guess my question is, I know that in the packet it said that there is a shared drive that all this is accessed on, but how do I get access to that? Because now it seems like all of these different elements would be in there. And is that easy to navigate?
So because it's a protected shared drive, we have to give you permission. But because you're attending this session, that's one of the things that I would do. And I'll send you a link that will actually get you to it. So how to access is clicking on the link. When you get there, it's going to look something like this. Let me back out of where I'm at. So we may give you access to the BMI training folder, or we may go right to the current online training, which is probably more likely. So you will see something like this. And it's organized by folders. And in each folder is a different training session. And there are, right, in this case, the numbers indicate which one is basic to more advanced. So the How to Thrive in Ministry is an overview of everything. And then how to start a group, how to manage a group, that's facilitation, and et cetera, et cetera. So if you were to click on one of these, any one of these, you'll see what's inside of it is a facilitation guide and the slide deck. The other folders here are things that we use internally, but you'll see that the core documents at that first level that you need. In this case, that's all you have is a slide deck and a facilitation guide. If I go to a different one, you'll see that it looks a little different inside. If I go to Group Coach, you'll see inside that one, I do have a couple of internal folders again. Then I've got a coaching guide and a PDF version of the coaching guide, because that's what we usually send out to people. You've got your own facilitation guide and again, your slide deck. So consistently, you'll see slide decks and facilitation guides. If there were pre-work assignments or if there were tip sheets, you'd see them in those folders. So when you
Wonderful.
go to use these are our folders. So download them onto your desktop is the easiest way because you can make some notes on them. But remember that these will be updated on a regular basis. So you always want to come back and download it. So if you're clicking on this symbol here is the download symbol. And that's how you can get it to on your desktop. So you'll be able to use it and take it with you. If you're at a place that doesn't have a network capability, you'll have it on your laptop for you to use as you need it.
Okay. Sounds good.
So then after we do these, I said we would look at next steps. So it's for you, it would be select a training topic, locate the content that you need, the slide deck and the facilitation guide, take a look at it, review it, practice it maybe a few times, pick an audience and schedule some time. And then after you're done with that audience, you've actually asked them or ask yourself as an observer, however you want to do it, what did you do really well and what could you have done differently or better?
Mm-hmm.
And that way you'll continue to improve your own facilitation of that material, either through feedback from others or from your own self-evaluation.
Great. Sounds easy enough.
Any questions?
I don't think so.
Great. Well, thank you for participating in this session. I really appreciate your questions.